Hi, my name is Morten Elvang. I'll talk about navigating complexity with collaborative lean portfolio management. Something is changing. We used to be able to set objectives and then divide and conquer, and with strong governance and aligning, now and then things seems to be working out, but the old tricks are not really working like they used anymore. We need to coordinate more and more often, and it's actually not always clear what everyone is doing. Something I have seen to work in the past now seem to take on a new, stronger role and lead us to a different way of doing portfolio management. And this is the story I will tell about in this presentation, something I'm still working on. So you can say what I have seen is that portfolio management is becoming even more important, and we are also changing the way that we are doing it. It used to be so that portfolio management was about aligning strategy to execution. That's the classical definition. But when we look at things today, there is one mistake in this area or this picture. It's more and more about being aligned, not aligning. So today we want to see strategy and execution aligned. And more it then becomes an activity of intent, strategic intent, and the contribution to that in strategic intent in a continuous conversation, staying aligned, moving as one, constantly thinking about how the intent and contribution meet. And for that purpose, we also need to involve a broader network of people. So that's basically what I will talk about today. First, an invitation into complexity. What do you think? Is the world becoming more or less complex? And how do you see complexity? Can you? And how would you see it? Do you have some good examples from your life or work? So there are different forces at play in any normal situation. It's illustrated really well by the Cynefin framework that's been increasingly popular over the past 10, if not more years. So it looks at the 5 different areas: clear, complicated, complex, chaotic, and confused. So in the clear domain, plans are a bit like recipes. It's like doing a Lego kit or assembling a piece of Lego furniture or IKEA furniture. The recipes rarely change, mistakes can happen, but most people can do this. Then in the complicated space, the plans require a bit more expert involvement. Misunderstandings can happen, misalignment happen, but generally the plans still hold. We can count on things to be causal, meaning we can have cause and effect in a predictable way. One example here is a new kitchen where you might need a plumber and a carpenter and a few other people, and it can be really complicated both to coordinate their work, and they might also have some disagreement between them. This is an example of complicated. Complex is an area where plans do not generally hold. New things will constantly emerge. Planning and organizing a party is a good example. It still has elements of stability, but you cannot really count on what will happen next. You will keep getting surprised. And finally, you have the chaotic area, just going around the 4 outermost spaces where there is no time to plan. So here you need to do some kind of intervention. Chaos rarely lasts long. Examples can be an accident, or even like a kid's party can have large elements of chaos built in. The final place you can be is to not really be sure what the dominating force is, and that's the confused area. So signs you could see that this presentation might be for you, and complexity is an increasingly dominating force, would be things like when people are frustrated and things are not working out as planned. It could also be that you more often see that value is lost because you have not been able to act in time. It's the place where we talk about disruption and a few other things that are listed here. So now I'm able to tell you what this presentation is really about. I'm assuming that you know a little bit about portfolio management. I assume that you are curious about complexity. And what I really would like for you to get out of this is that you get some ideas for how you can get started with all of this. So I'll tell a bit about the typical challenges I see. I'll tell about portfolio management. Then I will go into the point of the presentation, look at something I call decompose and recombine, look about how you can activate a network of sensors, and then going towards the wrap up, talk about how these ideas can be brought to life. Typical challenges you see, and some of these are systematic, is that in Denmark, in the public sector, you very frequently hear about enormous loss in public sector digitization products. Some of those might be because things are managed in the wrong way, and you simply use the wrong management frameworks to deal with things which are deeply chaotic and complex in their nature. You also have examples where work situations are managed with the wrong paradigms. So an example could be that you ask someone to do a plan in the complex domain planning. Making a plan that holds is not really an option, but you ask someone, please make a plan. You can do it any way you want, but the only thing I'm asking you is that please make sure it holds through. So that can be a cause of personal frustration, stress, and even in the most extreme cases lead to personal illness and other bad things. So I think there is a big sustainability implication in this as well, to reduce economic loss in society and help giving better conditions for everyone to work on small steps in the right direction. We also have the more classical examples, listed a few here, that everyone feels overloaded, managers are flying blind. Some statistics show that less than 10% of people actually understand strategy. And I put in a few red dots here. So one experience I have is that when you start working with portfolio management and there are too many priorities, then more often than not, more than 20% of the workload can be reduced immediately and spent on other and better things. The bigger than 50% red dot means that it's not uncommon for organizations to have had really sort of significant lost money on big projects that went wrong. So I claim it's not unlikely for large, long-living organizations to have experienced something that could eat more than half of a full year's growth project on a failed project, to have something that's been lasting many, many years and finally ends up being cancelled. Certainly from the Danish public sector, we know examples of that magnitude. Even if it wasn't 50% of the taxpayers' monies, then for the organization where the project failed, it was still very significant. These are all examples of typical challenges. Then if we look at portfolio management, what are we talking about? Well, like I said in the beginning, it's really classically about aligning strategy with execution, optimizing value delivered and minimizing economic risk. Portfolio management includes all money and all activities to deliver a strategy, and that's what I would call a portfolio. So in my view, it's all about the money. In technology development, money is often the same as people, so the capacity you pay with your money is what we really manage. Portfolio management in technology development is also a place where pricing is defined by opportunity cost. Getting one thing happens at the price of not getting something else that you cannot do instead. Also, interestingly, portfolio management is agnostic to how you do things. So in that sense, I'm less interested in agile portfolio management, etc. Really, this thing you need to do in portfolio management doesn't depend on how you decide to do your work. There's also a final thing that's important to note, is that if you have a challenge with your portfolio and you don't fix it with the portfolio, it can be very difficult to fix in another place. Here's a dynamic view of portfolio management that shows that it's looking at all the things you have ongoing, all your capacity, all your money. Typically, you would formulate a roadmap, and then that would be the roadmap that you deliver. You will need to look for signs that something is changing, and you will need to manage the risk, and of course implement feedback loops to make sure that things goes as you want, and otherwise do the course corrections. So if we look at then what is the ultimate job of the portfolio, I would say today it's about portfolio agility, which basically means that you can effectively and quickly change around resources across different parts of the organization. It also still includes the classical things, keeping strategy and execution aligned. It's about minimizing risk, keeping the payoffs. And then there's a thing which is super important, is that it's also the portfolio job to leave unfavorable options, to say no or no more, to stop things which have been going on too long but doesn't really care a promise. A few other things listed as well. So with this, I can tell what is the question I try to answer. I have actually called it taking LPM out to play with Cynefin, and I'm showing again the example of the Cynefin framework here. So really, what the mental exercise I like to do is to step from the right to the left and see what happens to portfolio management. Also, I emphasize that it's not my intent to prove that something is working. I have over a number of years observed that it is working, and I think it's a matter of some of the good old practices that we know taking on new importance because something is changing in how we need to look at portfolio management. So taking a complex view, what does that mean? Well, if you look to some of the general advice from the community, it's about descaling, it's by decomposing and recombining. It's about accepting that strategy emerges rather than is formulated and managed intentionally. It's about adjusting as you go along, a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. It's about capturing the weak signals and seeing the odd things that emerge, like the gorilla that's suddenly hidden in technical diagrams and photographs to be analyzed. It's about building a broad network of sensors. It's about repurposing rather than reinventing. Acceptation is an important concept. Introducing enabling constraints, creating adaptive spaces. And then equally much it's about avoiding to take too simple things from the complicated and clear domains, or the tempting call to order, meaning that if you guys just behaved a little bit better, if you just did your job a little bit better, everything would get fine. Things like that can work for a while, but it rarely has a long-standing impact when you deal with complexity. Of course, none of this is mine. It's something I have picked from the Cynefin community and the literature on complexity. A lot of it is coming from the work of Dave Snow. So let's try to have a look what happens if you decompose and recombine. So I did the exercise of decomposing the portfolio conversation. So basically it's looking at what are the underlying questions in that conversation. And I think it's the ones you're looking at here. So do we have the right objectives? Do we have the right team to implement those objectives? Do we have our money in the right place? Meaning, do we have the right balance of activities? Do we see the right results, the right contributions over time? Are we sustainably set up, reasonably balanced when it comes to load, spend, and risk? What are the weak signals that we can sense? And from what we see, is there anything that should cause us to pivot or keep going, changing the direction? The final question is really if everything adds up and you have a sustainable whole. You can also formulate this as the question, can you sleep at night? So if you have everything in good order, if you have done everything you can, then hopefully you get a good nice sleep. If something is still nagging you, then that's attention that you would have to keep working on. So if you accept this breakdown, And if you accept that nothing significant is missing, then we can go to the next step and start building things up again. And here I throw in the idea of organizing things around 3 collaborations: delivery alignment, clarity of intent, and fitness for purpose. Fitness for purpose is all about making sure that our teams can carry the weight of the strategy. Clarity of intent is all about making clear what's the current direction we are heading in, and if something is changing, to make sure that that's reformulated in a way that everybody can get it. Delivery alignment is the recurring activity, the constant ongoing conversation between the intent and the contribution. If what we are wanting is what we are getting. So you can put back some of the questions a little bit more simplified, saying that how well can we carry the strategy? What is our intent? How well do intent and contribution align? How well does all of this add up? And what may cause us to change our mind, so we have to work this over again? The things that you then work with in a portfolio context is very much objectives, roadmaps, and the work, the backlog. So you can say at the clarifying strategic intent, one way to express intent is by a set of objectives with funding related to these objectives. So an investment area would be a number of objectives with importance expressed by how much funding you put after those objectives. Then the strategic roadmap would be a timely view on when you expect what results to happen. Obviously, that needs to be reconciled with the contribution view, meaning for the people actually delivering to this strategic roadmap, what's their say. So everybody will be asked to tell, how do we understand the strategy, contributing objectives? What does our particular roadmap look like? What do we need from others to be able to deliver this roadmap? What are others getting from us? And then finally, some view to the actual backlog and the work and the tangible results that gets delivered. It's a little bit different from organization to organization how exactly you do this. The ecosystem impact is a thing you don't so often see in this context. It's all about making sure that you understand your target system well, that you are aware of current sources of dissatisfaction, technical debt, etc., that you need to look into. So in that sense, the intent is formulated both with the strategic ideas, but also with the potential deficits from the past that you need to take into account. And then finally, the fitness for purpose, it's in many ways the secret superpower. It contains like almost unlimited number of aspects. It's up to you to figure out which are the relevant parts that you need to look at. The overall idea is that you would find a way to make sure that your organization can carry the weight of the strategy. Then let's see how we can involve people and how we can bring this to life. It's the people who will be the sensors in this equation. So here's a picture that shows a tension line around which the strategy is dancing with the execution. The intent is dancing with the contribution to stay always aligned. The idea is that everybody who is contributing bring their best view to the situation. We call it bring no surprises. And then the broad network of stakeholders who participate, if it's like 1,000-person organization, it's not unreasonable to believe that 100 people would join this conversation. It's the people who form the sensors. And by having everyone being super well prepared, meaning if there are any conversations to be had about anything, you would actually have them beforehand. Presentations are made available a few days before. You still go over what's the understanding and allow everybody to ask the odd question and orientate themselves to what is going on. And in reality, this is about a meeting. So the delivery alignment itself, which is the key collaboration. If you're familiar with the Scaled Agile framework, if you have been at the PI planning, it's a little bit like a PI planning, but without planning. So it starts by setting the business context, clarity of intent. It looks at the delivery alignment, which is all the contribution presentations, really well prepared. And then at the end, there is time for open space, or bazaar time, as I like to call it. Around all of this is the fitness for purpose concern, is that you need to make sure that everybody who participates in this conversation is as well prepared as possible, and also as well trained, etc., as possible. What typically happens when you make this working is that in the beginning there's a lot of focus on the actual contributions. Over time, this becomes much more of a network event where people also bring other topics for the corridor conversations, and basically it becomes a bit of a hub in the whole governance. The two other collaborations, clarity of intent, fitness for purpose, supports the one that we look at here, that's called delivery alignment. It also helps to simplify governance. One example is on reporting. So even if not everything should be presented, because that's for sure not the idea, it should still be so that the presentations going into this event are so good that they can actually serve for whatever is required for upward reporting in terms of where a particular delivery activity is. So if you look a little bit on how this all comes to life, then since in many ways this is about setting up a meeting, of course there's many other aspects to it, but the physical instantiation is a new way of meeting around the work that you are doing. It's something that you can set up and prepare people for in 1 to 2 months. This is also the process of introducing portfolio management in this way, collaborative lean portfolio management. So very often, very early, you start finding activities that can be cancelled because they don't stand the test of the eye of the portfolio. Then when you have had the first delivery alignment, it's the most typical comment. It's a bit of a pivotal moment. So the most typical comment you have for people participating is like, wow, that's the best overview I have ever seen of what we are doing. Since it does require a bit of subtle changes, also cultural changes, and it requires changes to your governance, it's difficult to do this without sponsorship, and it's also difficult to do it without having some form of useful collaborative structure, meaning that you have to be set up in a way that you can see the accountable contributions to the strategy. Most organizations are already there, so in that sense, it doesn't require any changes to get to that first delivery alignment. From there, the work goes on, continue to bring clarity to objective and funding, and continue to work with the fitness of the organization, and even, if needed, redesign how organizational structure and governance is set up. I know this is a bit of eye candy, but still had some fun doing it. So you can say in the beginning, overload, politics, confusion, conflicts, all of that, you start going and you start bringing more clarity, reducing the load of the organization towards the first delivery alignment. And things get better. Then at some point in time, you can even say that it's a bit like a breath of fresh air, because things start to be less loaded and more clear. And then eventually, when you are through a process, it might take something like 6 to 9, maybe longer months. You start to see clearer and simpler governance. It very often shows first in things like reporting, that the reduce for reporting and controls get reduced if you can get the delivery alignment to work. But there are many other places where things show up, and there is just less need for coordination because you have the basic delivery alignment in place. So a little bit going towards the wrap up, you can say this is not unlike renovating a house with many small rooms, blocked drains, and leaking pipes. Of course, I'm saying this with a smile, and no, this is not your reality. Still, there might be elements of it. So it's about increasing the connectedness across the organization. It's about letting things run and flow, and it's about keeping things fit. So what we work with is in the first instance to reduce the load, increase the clarity. We are looking for the activities that can immediately be trimmed away because they don't stand the test of the eye of the strategy. And then what we really want to do is also to reduce the overall risk exposure. So to be better able to see and act to emerging trends and not go into deep and expect huge amounts of sunk cost or even big disasters. And Rosling, who is no longer with us, had this wonderful argument that if you can prevent just one of these disasters, it's actually worth everything you do in the name of this activity. Just one is enough to pay for it all. So that's worth keeping in mind, in addition to all the other benefits we see. So time to wrap up. If you can answer these questions really well, it also means that you will do other things simpler and better. It's a concept Eli Goldratt introduced called inherent simplicity. So basically, by doing a few things really well, it will make you do other things better. So that's the fundamental argument with this, meaning that let's answer these fundamental questions really, really well. Let's involve a broader set of people. Let's work with connecting the organization, and let's work in being better to sense the weak signals and do coordinated and orchestrated responses to change and shift directions as we learn of better options. So in many ways, it's you can be provoking and say this is a shift from defending position to wondering about direction. It is not a small change. It requires decomposing and recombining the portfolio conversation, actuating a broad network of people. It's about bringing clarity and redesign around the portfolio collaborations. So it will have impacts on governance and even how you organize. And then it's about taking this gradual approach, adjusting rather than trying to define things like strategy, priorities, even organizations and budgets. The shift can be dramatic, and in some way everything will change. The thing is, if you remember the acceptation thing, it's about repurposing, not reinventing. So a lot of elements are there, even often too many, but still you would need to see those in a new perspective and put these together in a new way. So one way to describe what will change is that from a situation where you set a plan or a budget and then later had to defend why you couldn't keep it, you would free up yourself to wonder about why it went like it went and why the adjustments you did or you want to do are needed. To get away with all of this, you need a strong sponsor and a good facilitator. Perhaps one of those could be you. Thanks a lot for listening. Really appreciate it. If you want to know more, you can find more ideas on this blog on LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm also very happy to have conversations. And if you work with some of these ideas already, or if you want to have some feedback on the ideas you have, very happy to have that virtual cup of coffee, or if you're close to the Little Mermaid in Copenhagen, even a real one. Thank you so much. Hope to see you soon.